If there were no poetry on any day in the world, poetry would be invented that day, for there would be an intolerable hunger. Poet Muriel Rukeyser once wrote, how true! And yet, the most poetic thing about poetry is how its beauty can be steeped in oblivion in a matter of minutes. Readers and poets question themselves time and again, do we need the poems that take minutes to weave and minutes half to read? Do we need poetry in our lives? I've asked that question too, and I've found the answer. We need more poetry in our lives. Poetry is like a placid stream, gentle on the surface, bubbling and spouting. The swift verse is the fountain, its creation in a matter of minutes, the work of months' thought, flexing and wrestling to find the best way to manifest. A thought sparks up in dim light and wedges past several footstools to transform into a lingering piece. Toadstools, bright with color, deck the narrow course the thought pursues and impart their color to it. What started out as a little thought with some force, some gumption, becomes unknowingly a poem with a meaning that was never intended, but which it assumes cheerfully. The soul is the thought, a little lost, meandering, surfacing through more powerful words. These words may have reached you like a candid bolt of thunder, but the realization that I put into them reached me after years of writing and exploration. This realization, coming so late, has impressed on me the fact that poetry is too precious to become undone by its simplicity. We need poetry as much as we need yoga or food or exercise because poetry is not about the universe, the world, pollution, climate change before it is about you, the individual, and your discovery, journey, and story. It is the food for your thoughts and soul, the open air for your feelings, the candle on a dark day. Your poem is your beacon of hope and happiness. And you may say, fine, I understand, but if I don't get poetry, how can I create a poem? The first step is to clear any misconceptions you may have regarding the writing of poems. If you find yourself thinking, I don't have and can't provide all the answers, counter that with, but I do have and can ask one really good question, or I don't use super words or poetic devices. My poems don't resemble those of classic literature. Tell yourself, my poem doesn't have to replicate a model. I use my style, my words, my thoughts, or this is taking tediously long. I may forget where I started off. Remind yourself that you should explore all the possibilities and enjoy the exploration, however long it may take. Once you begin, poetry becomes as much about discovering as about creating, about believing as about sharing. Keep reminding yourself that you can pour power and feeling into your writing and keep it genuine. Like any creative art, penning poetry is both elaborate and fun, tedious and seamless. My goal is to guide everyone to feel like poetry is their thing too. So, I've chosen to break the process down into its intimidating and interesting parts and show you some tricks you can have up your sleeve when the going gets tough. The most daunting part of writing poetry is also the most inviting aspect of reading it, the rhyme. Victor Hugo mused, rhyme, that enslaved queen, that supreme charm of our poetry, that creator of our meter. Consider this, and I speak from the heart. Colors flinging on bare screens, azure washes and magenta tides, a new life being born, crescent strokes and dashed strokes, clement skies, a new world, grey eyes wallowing with new emotions. No one thought that monochromatic pictures of grey, blotches of white, and black streaks could be beauty. The deep grey eyes saw the world in black and white, So she created her world in colors and took everyone's word for its godliness. Those grey eyes, soft as velvet, yet as forgiving as wool, held within them a creator's pride and a sufferer's confusion. Our world sees in color, but perceives in black and white. So some saw one, while the others saw the other. There was no rhyme there. Did the poem go berserk? Of course it didn't. Doesn't it narrate the poignant story of a pained artist? Poetry is just that. It is what you see and want the reader to be able to, disguised between words. The question is, what kind of disguise would you choose? And there, your fear of rhyme has been dispelled. The rhyme, if you don the adventurer's cap, is your greatest weapon. It comes with a caveat, however. While the poet can get carried away with a trot of words, the reader can lose herself in the maze of rhyming words. A discovery I made was that the abstraction of imagery is the best cure to the technicality of rhyme. A poem I penned on bullying will show you this better. To be or not to be? That is the main question. To be or not to be? That is the main question. Doing wrong for popularity? Is that now the most popular suggestion? Six mighty men, musing over their weapons, chose with a lofty arrogance the scathing word. Oh, said the first, it will only need slight polish, and a most seamless throw, with an impact, lo, and continue the second. It is most benign. It will pierce, but with not a drop of blood. How sly and pompous, how clever, how mightier is the pen than the sword. So smile the third, its cast iron case will camouflage its lethal powers. And then, when preparation and opportunity meet, it will make the bravest cower. And the other three, well, opted for the old all for one for all policy. With blind faith in their partner's design, they knew not to what they had just resigned. Words are hurtful, words can mine. True, but aren't there those two that are truly divine? So why not make a wise choice? Use words that resound with grace and poise. When you create images, use analogies, or pose a question, the rhyme becomes secondary and the poem doesn't lose its elementary essence. The gloomy shadows of writer's block are here to stay. Which writer can wish away the writer's block? Here's my secret. I found the writer's block stems not only from the desire to pen a perfect piece, but also from the fear of leaving your work unfinished. Let me put any such fears that you may have to rest. Write what's closest to your heart. Don't fear grammatical errors, they correct themselves in due course, and be ready to come up with an unfinished piece. Poetry, although it has a beginning, a middle, and an end, may seem like it echoes just one or two of the three. That's because it essentially either asks a question or answers one. If it does both, perfect. The point is, if your poem makes things a fraction clearer for you, it has served its purpose to make you more aware and a better person. Poetry is an echo asking a shadow to dance, penned Carl Sandburg. Cobble streets, cement roads, cross bridges, junctions, signals, breezes, open spaces, dreams, thoughts. They're just words, but ah, if it were not for stories. Have you ever thought of a lane, of a way that you've caught a glimpse of somewhere? Oh, not the same somewhere, somewhere else, where roses were pink. Think for a while. Think. Why do you positively know that place? Why? After all, There was just a barren dust track and its twin, empty spaces. Think, dig hard, and you might find that you saw a Santro pass in both Pune and say Hyderabad. Think again. Maybe since we are all human and there is more alike one of us in another than there is in anything else, maybe more than one someone wished to ward off evil by means of the traditional remedy. Maybe you saw a brother and his other at two ends of the world, or you might have seen a protruding rock, or a stray, or a child speak to his mother, or a signpost that triggered a thought unique to you. An idea. At one place, an idea. The second time, the idea done with and dusted. Through this poem, I try to discover the answer to a question that had been ringing in my head for a long time. Why do two places seem so alike? As you would have noticed, the answer isn't clear yet, but I've moved a few inches closer to it. If you can call into question your beliefs and alter them, or answer a bothering question through your creation, you have unleashed the power of poetry. Now, the confident creator of your very own poem, its meaning melts into the world and mingles with the understanding of the reader, changing it for the better. Poem begins in delight and ends in wisdom, Robert Frost concluded. Where barns are swiveling golden manes, and silver crests, and cantering ponies, where life is in the meadow in the midst of life, the radiant silver of little spikes, a brighter hue of familiar bites. A stable is a quaint old tale, all wood and splinters, all dusty and dingy, all traits adding to its grandeur, including the fine young mare that rests inside. Je me suis trompée, who rests inside. For she breathes the dinge and grunts the dust. The splinters chisel her tail and feeds on carrots. Come on, a dull grey dressing, pearl pale. The humble lady, from dream to dream, as these grow louder, and the fields, hazier, grapples with her giving limbs, with unfamiliar faces, every fifth week, with a routine that tries her, and she tires of. Who says the joy of the breaker in is unparalleled? When the bit fits and the girdle hurts, when the saddle fastens and the whip cracks, when there is a much nobler creature investing her patience for a return of simple faith, living each breath not as if it were her last, but as if it were her first. What honesty in her hopes! And so it is true happiness for the horse when she finds that there is some man whose honesty parallels hers. Through this poem, the plight of a horse not only reaches the poet's heart but also that of the reader. With the power of the pen, you can touch upon the most glaring issues by asking the right questions and seeking the answer with all your heart. You can change the world, one poem at a time, one reader at a time, one issue at a time. Here's my story. My tryst with poetry was unplanned. Imagine a 7-year-old girl wondering a lot about a lot of things, just as all 7-year-olds do, and loving the look of her handwriting and the taste of her pencil. That was me. I had the pencil in my hand, the idea in my head, the book on the table, and just as a young child realizes one fine day that the weather seems best to start to walk, poetry was supplied, not created. Do you see? It's that simple. Or as one of my favorite poets, Sarah Kay, famously said, if there's a poem inside of you, it has to come out. When I began to write, I wondered whether a person could be afraid of everything because I was afraid of many, or if Mother Earth were a living being, how incomparable her pain would be. Sometimes I found that animals could be animated into expressing their all in a day's work, and a new universe of poems was born. Pun intended. Over time, poetry for me became a grounding factor, a source of joy, curiosity, and sensitivity towards my feelings and the surroundings. Every poem has a unique story knit with it, as will be the case with every poet. Together, they trace out a journey, the evolution not only of writing style and thought, but also the evolution of a human being. Now, touching a serious note, there is much to be done as a responsible reader, notwithstanding as a poet and observer. Offering you some assistance in decoding a poem will launch you in the right direction. So much is unheard and unsaid that it would be a shame if what was said and heard were not to be understood. Skipping back to the poem, New World, let me explain it to you from the poet's perspective. I wrote the poem because I felt that many of us aspire to pursue a certain passion but are held back by the lack of the one factor that's essential to master that art. But should that hold us back? Never. Just as dyslexia didn't deter Agatha Christie nor color blindness, the artist in the poem. The pain, however, remains the pain of not being able to see the wonder that one has created in the form that others see it in. There, it is just a matter of allowing words to form a picture in your head. You don't have to be able to paraphrase, just be able to feel, visualize, and appreciate. Your task as a reader and poet is like that of a programmer to put the pieces together and get the syntax nearly right. It's a lot easier, really, as there's no debugging to be done. If, however, you find your head against a wall, believe me, it's a crucial part of the process. Trust in it and don't give up. Cascades of ink splayed over the floor, rustling paper, groaning windows, the pirouette of the calendar as it lifts its chin up mockingly, and a dull brown table, except for some motivating dishes which sit upon it alluringly but impatiently. Ink whisked over yellowing paper, an exasperated shadow against the curtain, silhouetted against both fancies and targets. You, writer, write from an intimate personal standpoint that anyone else only has a remote chance of understanding. And yet you do not stop. The ink flows, the fingers dance over the keys, whatever it may be. So no one gets your little piece of art. It's inscrutable, incomprehensible. Yet you write away the burdens and the troves in your mind, hoping to free it from them, but knowing that they will now stay with you forever. When do you stop then? Not to start ever again? Let your words answer this question, whether stacked on a bookshelf or in a tiny little notebook, privy to some amazing things. Oh, writer, you're one determined creature, aren't you? My parting words are those of Robin Williams in the Dead Poets Society. Remember that the grand play goes on and you may contribute a verse, that the powerful play goes on and you may contribute a verse. What will your verse be?